Then there are others who are gung-ho supporters of the government school system and are constantly throwing up objections in order to support their negligence as parents and keep their kids under Nebuchadnezzar's statue. The men that support this arrangement are fine with it because they are passive and because they like the extra cheddar that their wife brings in by working at the school, and because she is one of the good ones. She gives off enough holy juju to support the existence of the entire godless system. Welcome to the Godly Troublemaker podcast. I'm your host, Andy Parker. The Godly Troublemaker exists to shine the light of Christ in the eyes of the idols of our day. Let's go get into some trouble. In all my years of godly troublemaking, I can honestly say that there is one cultural idol that stands out above the rest, especially in evangelical circles. I have done my best to mock and malign arguments and lofty opinions raised against the knowledge of God, and perhaps even have a little fun along the way, perhaps even too much fun. One may even dare say that I put the fun back in fundamentalism. Others would say that I just forgot the N. I would like to believe it's been a little bit of both. All of this to say that I have received just a wee bit of constructive criticism over the years, and said criticism, coupled with the volume and adjectives surrounding said criticism, can be very helpful indicators letting you know when you've pissed all the way up the Asherah pole. There seems to be one idol that elicits more noise than all of the rest. Again, especially in evangelical circles. Although it seems that in the past decade, the mushies within the church have become more sympathetic towards abortion, or at least silent on abortion for the sake of being winsome after all, and they have certainly become more sympathetic, if not outright embraced the homo agenda, thus invoking a response, nay, constructive criticism, when said topics are brought up. However, the one idol that seems to invoke an immediate, gut-level, visceral, and vitriolic response faster and more violently than any of the others when rebuked, exposed, and mocked is that of public education. Now, one would expect this regarding the secularists. After all, if you're a secularist, it makes sense that you would want your child educated in secularism, because the one thing that every parent wants to impart to their child is their worldview. Education being the most religious thing a parent can do and give to their children. Quote, "Train up a child in the way that he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." Proverbs 22:6. Quote, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." Deuteronomy 6:4-9. Quote, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." Ephesians 6:4. Now, a Christian parent may hear those verses and say, "Yes, of course, I agree with you. This is why we read the Bible with our children, catechize them, and pray with them, and are members in good standing at a Bible-believing, God-fearing church." I would say amen to that, if in fact that is the case. If this is the case, which would be best case scenario, it still doesn't warrant sending your kids to the Leviathan of government education. The message that you are sending to your children is that Christ is sovereign in your home and in your church, but not in the public school system. Submitting to Christ here and here, home and church, is a matter of life and death, but not here, the school. The best argument that one can muster in response to this is that the public school system is neutral. No, they're not, and you shouldn't be. There is no such thing as neutrality. If you actually think they're neutral, ask yourself, are they neutral regarding the proclamation of Christ in the schools? Or do they actively oppose it? Are Christian teachers free to actively declare the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ in every discipline in this neutral system? Also, in this neutral system, Christian teachers are told without equivocation to never mention the name of Jesus, because neutrality and all. Like Winston Churchill said, quote, "Some people's idea of free speech is that they are free to say whatever they like, but if anyone says anything back, it is an outrage." Now, some may protest that they are sending their child to be educated by the government regarding disciplines that are neutral, even though they admit the system is not, because they would say that there isn't a distinctively Christian way to do math. It should be noted that the government just hired 87,000 IRS agents that would agree with them. Is there a distinctively Christian way to do math? Yes. How about according to the law of God? Or how about this? Without the triune God of Scripture, who created by the word of his power and orders the universe according to the word of his power, is the only standard that makes the very concept of math possible. Is there a distinctively Christian way to do history? Well, just ask the leftists that are trying to rewrite history. Is there a distinctively Christian way of doing science? Well, ask the CDC and Anthony Fauci and the CCP. But then I repeat myself. The point is, there is no neutrality. As evidenced by a recent statement by the Michigan Democratic Party, quote, "Not sure where this parents should control what is taught in schools because they are our kids," is originating, but parents do have the option to choose to send their kids to a hand-selected private school at their own expense, if this is what they desire. The purpose of public education in a public school is not to teach kids only what the parents want them to be taught. It is to teach them what society needs them to know. The client of the public school is not the parent, but the entire community, the public." End quote. The setting of the curriculum is not neutral. The content of what is taught is not neutral. The administrators hiring the teachers are not neutral. The ones doing the teaching are not neutral. The government that employs the administrators and teachers are not neutral. The government system, in principle, is godless. At best, they teach that Jesus is irrelevant in the classroom. That's not neutrality. At worst, what we have today is not only the open hostility towards Christ, but any vestige of his image. Quote, "Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters." Matthew 12:30. Yeah, but we are sure public school is the one exception. How is it then that any Christian parent could lay their child on the altar of secularism? Some parents are ignorant. They don't know what the alternatives are. They don't know what to do. They are concerned, overwhelmed, and scared, and understandably so. Well, the church needs to come alongside such parents and to love and encourage and support them in whatever way that they can. Then there are others who are gung-ho supporters of the government school system and are constantly throwing up objections in order to support their negligence as parents and keep their kids under Nebuchadnezzar's statue. The men that support this arrangement are fine with it because they are passive and because they like the extra cheddar that their wife brings in by working at the school, and because she is one of the good ones. She gives off enough holy juju to support the existence of the entire godless system. If you find yourself objecting to what I'm saying, perhaps even getting provoked and a little angry, I would say said troublemaking hasn't even begun yet. We're still in the introduction. If you object, you should stick around to listen to my objections to your objections while being objectionally objectified. Objectionable objections. The first and perhaps most prevalent objection for not pulling your kids out of the government mill is that your kids are missionaries. Now, I spent a lot of time on this in episode 9. You should go back and watch and listen to it twice. So I'll be brief here. No, they are not missionaries. The vast majority of the time, this is thrown out there by parents who have not equipped their children for this because they themselves are not equipped for this. But in using this excuse, they do sound pious, and nobody ever follows up with them or challenges them on this because, evangelism is important for everyone else to do. These same parents will also refer to Daniel and say that their kids are, just like him. First of all, Daniel was exceptional even amongst God's elite. But even so, Daniel was taken as a slave to serve the king in Babylon. His parents didn't send him, and he didn't willingly go. He was a slave, which I guess is a great comparison to public schools. True, Daniel was faithful to God in Babylon, but he constantly prayed for the restoration of his people and for their return from exile. He refused to practice the paganism of the state, and it almost cost him his life. And it would have, apart from divine intervention on more than one occasion. Daniel would have never justified the existence of Babylon and all of their idolatry just because he was there as a missionary. Not only that, Daniel didn't win Babylon. God had determined to destroy it. What makes you think your kid, whom you probably didn't read the Bible with and catechize and have willingly sent into Babylon, is greater than Daniel? Another objection that people throw out there is that, they turned out okay. No, you didn't. You're still trying to justify sending your kids into a godless, God-forsaken system that the only good thing you can say about is that it was so terrible, but that you survived it. This does nothing but presuppose my point. You're welcome. What are some other things that people survive? Cancer, shark attacks, rape, war, violent crime, robbery, jumping out of a burning building. I survived or I turned out okay is not justification for any of those things happening. And I would argue that if you could prevent any of those things from happening, you would. Parents do everything in their power to keep their children out of harm's way. The fact of the matter is that parents send their kids to public schools because they don't perceive the threat or the danger. And I'm not talking about the socialism and the homoism. That's all downstream. I'm talking about the perceived neutrality and the open godlessness. Perhaps one of the most well-known objections is that of socialization. It goes something like this. I couldn't possibly take my kids out of public school because they won't get socialized. The underlying presupposition is that any and all socialization is good, which justifies sending your kids to a prison where they will receive forced socialization all day and every day. Now, not all socialization is good. In fact, some of it is horrible, like gangs and the Democratic Party. Also, where in the world did anyone get the idea that the only place a child could ever be around other human beings is in a public school? Now, our church is filled with homeschoolers who are very well socialized, not to mention every other alternative to public schools where they can receive socialization. You would think someone would have the wherewithal to ask, how were children socialized before the invention of public schools 100 years ago? Well, no one actually knows, you see, because it was rare to even see a child. They often lived in caves because there was no way to socialize them. Another objection is that there is nothing wrong with the school. The only thing wrong with the schools is that parents need to get more involved because everyone knows if Dr. Frankenstein spent more time with his monster, he would have been an outright nice monster. The parents that care have been involved, are involved, and will continue to get involved, and it has changed nothing. So in one respect, I would commend every parent that goes to school board meetings and gives them a good what have you. But I also can't help but point out the obvious. You are actively supporting the very system that you are trying to change by still having your kids there. This is ensuring that nothing will change, kind of like getting on a plane to Mexico, but complaining the whole time about how Canada is better. You may have impacted some of the people on the plane, but when it lands, you're in Mexico. Here's another one. I would love to do something different, but I can't afford the alternative. Well, what's the opportunity cost of keeping your kid in public school? I dare reckon to say that it's going to cost you and everyone else far more in the long run by keeping them there. Every single election cycle, politicians of both parties propose spending more money on public education in order to fix public education, which presupposes the obvious. But people eat it up because it's an investment in the future of our country. We're okay with the government spending an excessive amount of money on education, but you don't want to. Well, joke's on you. Actually, the joke is on all of us. Truth be told, you're going to pay the piper one way or another. To pull your kids out of public school will be hard, and you will incur additional expenses no matter what you do. This is where churches should be on the front end of helping. Why not dump that stupid youth ministry budget and actually use it for, well, youth ministry, namely education? If America rose to prominence in the world because of the fear of God and a Protestant work ethic and free markets and competition, why in the world would we ever think that a godless socialist system like centralized public education would ever produce anything other than godless socialists? Parents obviously care about education. Politicians have done their polling, which is why they can't shut up about it. If Christian parents remove their children en masse, it would be hard initially, but the market would create a tremendous amount of innovation, alternatives, and competition, and the church should be on the front end of this, helping parents out. Well, what about athletics? Well, what about them? First of all, it's not the role of government at any level to ensure that your children have the opportunity to play games. Second, just because you want the opportunity for your kids to play games doesn't justify the existence of a godless educational system, even if they provide you with cookies, like games. And though I'm not supporting our sports idolatry, I would just like to point out the obvious. If it costs the public schools 3 times as much to accomplish lesser results everywhere else, why would that also not be the case regarding athletics? Perhaps strangling the public behemoth would be good for athletics as well. Lastly, this should go without saying, so let me say it. That's not what schools are for. Another objection for not removing your child from the Babylonian schools is the Christian teacher, because the one stalwart Christian teacher who truly loves Jesus and her students is justification for coercing every Christian parent in our country to pay for a godless educational system. But if Miss Lippy can save just one kid, then it was all worth it. Just like one baby snatched from the hands of a smoldering Molech idol was worth all of the other ones being murdered. Honestly, this is just stupid. This good Christian teacher is not a slave in Babylon. They've gone there willingly, and they don't even have half the balls of Daniel. Otherwise, they would have quit a long time ago or been fired a long time ago. And if there are so many good Christian teachers, why have the schools gotten progressively worse? If Miss Lippy or your missionary kid could have saved the schools, they would have. What about the objection that my school is different? To which I would just respond, no, it's not. Or what about the single mom? Well, you know you're getting desperate when you're using single moms to justify everything. But to that, I would simply say it is better to help her in the rearing and educating of her children than to encourage her to send them to the wolves. Conclusion. If you are a Christian, There is absolutely no reason to keep your kids in government schools. Lines are drawn, bridges are burned. It is Christ or chaos. Let me just conclude with the words of the Puritan Jeremiah Burroughs, quote, "There is little hope for children who are educated wickedly. If the dye has been in the wool, it is hard to get it out of the cloth." End quote. Before you go, if you like this video and want to see more, subscribe to our channel and like this video and leave a comment. Also, go follow us on social media to stay posted on all of our new content, updates, and lots more.